Hello, Kansas City, and welcome back to another episode of Speak Up, brought to you by Televida. Televida always gives us the opportunity and the option to be able to speak up and talk to Kansas City. Remember, you can always come to Televida and find great television, great information. So let's get started with today's episode. You know, my biggest reason for even starting to speak up is so that we can talk about our ecosystem and how do we rebuild our ecosystem? What do we need to do? And some of the things that we tend to put to the side is our recidivism or our returning citizens. People like me who had to return back to this area and find my way. So then you think about our young men, which if you look at the statistics in our prison systems, the black men are very heavily populated. And so when they come home, what do they have? How do they make it? What do they do? And when will they ever become full-fledged citizens again? What are their options? What do they know and what don't they know? So here today is someone who is really changing the platform and the pathway to coming out and redeveloping or redirecting your life. Coming out of prison is not an easy thing. And if you know anything about the needs of someone returning in the population, it takes someone that's been there. Today in the studio with me, I have Naeem Alami, and I tell you, I love this boy right here. This guy, when I met him a few years back, I knew that he was going to do some great things. He founded a company called Swag Inc. He's got all the gear, all the merch, that's a good thing. But what he's doing, his work, that's what's most important. So without further ado, I want to introduce Naeem, and I want to welcome him to speak up.
Thank you, Kim. It's an honor to be with you here today on Speak Up. What a wonderful introduction. I want to thank the audience for tuning in. And so a little bit about me. I'm someone that has been impacted by mass incarceration over 30 years, which would be my inspiration to creating a nonprofit that introduced a new business model in the mass incarceration space. And so SWAG Inc., it stands for Serve, Witness, and Give Guidance. Inspiration never ceases. And what we do, we promote ownership for those impacted by mass incarceration. We develop returning citizens through education, employment etiquette, and entrepreneurship. But what's important is that term returning citizen, right, Kim? And so for me, it relates to a constitutional jurisdictional matter of the 13th Amendment, right? So if you are punished for a crime thereof and sent to prison, you lose that citizenship. So the logic follows, once you return to the community, then you should have those rights restored. And so that's why we use the language of returning citizen and the work that we do in the mass incarceration space.
So let's play with that word in a moment. I do want to talk a little bit about you. I know that you were inspired because you were a product of the system and how coming home, the things you had to go through. I think we talked about being homeless.
Right.
So tell us about that, because that's a real thing.
Right. And so for me, that's a really great intro. I like to use a ladder to symbolize upward social mobility and having 10 rungs. And so for me, my 10 rungs are dysfunction, trauma, poverty, systemic racism, environments, foster care, gang life, and prison. And my 10th rung being social entrepreneurship, which created that ownership for me. And so my introduction into the criminal justice system would come at 8 years old, right? In terms of being in foster care, going into a new environment, being pressured to commit a robbery and being arrested for that at 8 years old.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so navigating through that, experiencing 18, 21, and 35, incarcerated and returning at 40 to the community, to your point, in terms of homelessness. And so that was created by my PO in terms of 5 administrative errors, wanting to relocate from Kansas to Missouri. And so because she created those errors, They had to be resubmitted. The application, it took 30 to 45 days each time. And, you know, my family, who I was dislocated from, was in Missouri. And so I didn't have any resources in Kansas. And ultimately, I would be sleeping in an inoperable car in the back of an apartment building for the first time in my life.
So, as a returning citizen, you found yourself in the back of a car.
Yes, ma'am.
And people don't realize that when a lot of our people get out of prison, they get just kind of dropped off. That includes homelessness. If you don't have a halfway house or a reentry home to go into without family, then you're outside. Some of our returning citizens were on medications, which were medical or mental health medications, and they have after 30 days, they have no medication. So there's so many factors to what happens when you come out of prison. Tell me about some of the other things dealing with or working with returning citizens right now that you deal with every day.
Right. And so it's a really great question. And so for me, when I was in that situation and sleeping in that car, the only thing that I had tangible with me was my business plan that I wrote in prison.
Wow.
Right. And so I was coming back to the community after serving a 5-year prison sentence for a crime I didn't commit. And what that looked like was I didn't testify on my friend who was under investigation for distribution of cocaine. And because I didn't testify, they dropped the charges on him, filed them on me, and I received a 68-month prison sentence, going in with 3 degrees from Kansas State University and being accepted to KU for a master's in public administration, as well as Florida Coastal School of Law for a law program, right? And so as I was in that situation, I didn't know it at the time, but I would use the principles of social entrepreneurship in terms of the 5 principles of design thinking: empathy, ideate, prototype, define, and test, to write a plan that will create ownership, legacy, and elevate the status of the people impacted by mass incarceration.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
that first principle of empathy would, allow me to do something that I hadn't done in 3 prison experiences, was talk to the person next to me about the things that had impacted them. How did they get in this situation? What did they think they would need to be successful? And that's where I would get the program deliverables of our HOPES program of healing, ownership, planning, employment, and sustainability to be offered 1 year prior to release, and then working with our clients 1 to 3 years in the community. And so the biggest challenge that returning citizens face is the opportunity to heal from that experience, right? So just think about it. One of the things I like to say is reentry, or the process of returning to the community after a prison experience, is like returning from the dead.
Yeah.
Right?
Truly.
Right?
Yes.
Your family member, they experience a death in the family, right? And then you return.
Yeah.
That's scary,
Yeah.
right? And so you have been in an environment that is stagnated, and they're moving in a scenario where as the world turns.
Yes.
Right.
Because life goes on.
Right.
Life continues and yours basically stops.
Correct.
And so coming back into the system, and I totally understand being caught up in someone else's activity, and you having to take the fall for something you had nothing to do with. That's a part of the way our system works in America.
Unfortunately, right?
Unfortunately. But however, one of the things that I recognized in you was the same with me, was that I was not going to live in that scenario.
Right.
We spend a lot of time trying to recreate our past or trying to be repaid for our past, when in all actuality, yesterday is gone. Yesterday is totally gone. Actually, 5 minutes ago is gone.
Correct.
We can't do anything about what we said 5 minutes ago, but we can take what we say in the next 5 minutes and make it positive and productive.
Right.
So I look at what you're doing, and I look at just the ideal that you never become a citizen actually again.
Right.
A full-fledged citizen. Now, I do know that in some states, and Missouri is one of the states that you can regain your rights to vote.
Correct.
You can go and vote. That's something that are a lot of people that have completed their sentence and been released from
Correct.
parole. They don't know,
Mhm.
or they don't exercise.
Correct.
And a lot of it, I believe, the exercising part of it comes from a lot of them feel like they don't have a voice because of the way the system robbed them of their lives.
Correct. And so you're silenced, you're warehoused, you're alienated from your labor, and you have no value. And this is a precipice that the prison industrial complex come from,
Yeah.
that is centered in the Constitution, right? When you look at Black people representing 12, 13% of the population, but over 50% of the population that's incarcerated, that tells you, or it confirms, that we are not situated with protections in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And so that's a really important topic. And in fact, in 2020, during COVID, my team and I at JWA, shout out to JWA Marketing, we put together a voter registration for returning citizens.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
we registered 99 people who didn't know the criteria to being able to vote, what that looked like, where they would do it at. And so we set up shop right at the Sunfresh Market on Prospect and 31st.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, though, and we're going to get back to where we were going, but I do want to throw this out here. Registering is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the polls is another.
Right, that action step.
We need you at the polls now. It more than anything, more than ever.
Right.
This next 10 years, we cannot be lax. We cannot be lax. We have to go. We have to vote.
We can't afford to be disengaged.
We got to vote for mayors and council people and state reps and state senators and governors and the president and the vice. We've got to get better at what we're doing.
Correct.
But we'll go back to that, because that's where the fight can start. We get the people in there that can look at the Constitution and amend it.
Right.
Because while we are still amending the 13th Amendment every, 25 years,
right.
we got to get an amendment to say, yes, we're going to let y'all vote a little bit more. That's insane. But I want to go back to you, because I want people to be motivated as well. Because a lot of people always think that when those that come out of incarceration that are successful have a handout or have family that's going to carry them or connect them. And some do. But there's hope. And I mean, we have a hustle in us to a certain extent. But then we have I don't want to do that. It's too hard. Somebody owes me. How did you get out of the car? Because I know you started working for one of the couriers, and I'm going to let you decide if you want to call them out or not, that actually catapulted Swaggy.
Absolutely. So really great opportunity to elaborate on why I didn't kill myself in the backseat of that car. Praise to Allah. And so I had an example in Nipsey Hussle. And so from 2010 to 2013, that was really my lost years. And so I had went to K-State after a prison experience. I got 3 degrees and I went 0 for 200 in front of employers. No one would hire me because they only referred to the possession of marijuana case that I had, and I spent 3.5 years in prison for. Quick fun fact, today I have a medical marijuana card and I can have up to 4 ounces, right? But 20 years ago, I went to prison kind of thing, right?
Right.
And so going through all those adversities and not receiving any opportunities, I started back selling drugs. And it was a really difficult decision because it was an indulgent time in my life where I took more than I gave.
Yeah.
Right. And I went back home to get some more product, and I happened across NIP, and it was in 2013. And I asked bro, I said, hey, bro, who you going to sign with? Rick Ross or some other label? And he said, for me, it's about ownership. It's about creating a long-term plan and elevating the status of the people around me. That's what's important to me. And I didn't know it at the time, but he was having a legacy conversation with me. And so then when I'm doing my prison sentence, I had an opportunity to see him grow and gain perspectives from his interviews. And I said, I need to write a business plan.
Right.
And what I gleaned from that conversation with Nipsey was that what he empowered me to do was create an opportunity for myself, whereas I had always been looking for someone to do something for me.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was the power. And I knew it was real. And so, but transitioning back in that moment in that car, you know, I said a prayer. And, you know, I said, you know, oh Allah, with difficulty comes relief. With difficulty comes relief. Right. And, you know, can I have my relief? Because I can't bear this, you know. And, you know, Allah answered my prayer. And I called my supervisor at UPS. I had just got promoted from being a package handler to a human resource supervisor. And took my first week of vacation, and that's the week that I stayed in the car. And when that eclipsed, you know, I had to make a guttural decision, you know? And so I called my supervisor, Shannon, and, you know, I said, hey, bro, I got to resign. You know, then I just broke down, started crying, and was like, yeah, I think I might kill myself. He knew that I had just got out of prison, but he didn't know that I was like sleeping outside, showering at the truck stop next door, and going through all these changes with my PO and my family. And, you know, and so he came and got me. And just by the grace of God, his mother would be a returning citizen, and he would grow up as a child of an incarcerated parent. And she ultimately had a rental property that no one was in, and I was able to secure housing like that. And I just knew that I was on my mission.
Wow.
And, you know, shortly thereafter, I submitted my business plan, as I'd also been transversing through the entrepreneurial ecosystem in KCMO. Submitted my business plan to my manager, Eric Day at UPS. And I was really scared, right? I just got promoted to HR. I'm giving this dude a business plan and, you know, that he might fire me.
What's
you
wrong
know?
with you?
Right. Focus on UPS. What are you talking about? But Eric saw the value and he allowed me to work autonomously. And it allowed me to further co-brand UPS Swag Inc. and focus my hiring initiatives on returning citizens, which led to a partnership with the 4th District of Probation and Parole, where a proof in concept would evolve and I would be able to increase retention by 70%, increase attendance by 50%, and zero recidivism amongst our clients.
Wow.
In 2019, and then in 2020, as society shut down, the relationships I formed in probation and parole flowed us to the Department of Corrections, which really aligned us with the business model of pre-entry planning, which makes swagging different.
And they had to let people out during COVID, because people were getting COVID in the prison system because of the confinement.
Last ones to be served with the option of getting the vaccine, right? And you know what? I know what that was like. 2 years it took us to get in to the facility that we're doing our business model out of now.
Wow. So I want to pivot a little bit because you talked about having that relationship or actually being able to be influenced by someone like Nipsey Hussle, who at the time you didn't realize he was giving you some legacy nuggets. You know, it was like you was just having a conversation.
He spoke over my head to be transparent.
But I think about our young men and women today, because when we look at our community, the rate of violence and criminal activity that goes on in our urban core. And I live in urban core, so I can talk about the urban core.
Me too.
I live in the heart, and I love the heart, and I love my neighborhood. But I think a lot of times when I look at what is wrong and why are we still in this cycle, I think that there's a place that young people are hopeless. And they figure they've been in this cycle and it's just a matter of time before I'm either in prison or dead.
Right.
And you have some nuggets, some legacy nuggets that I hear you say all the time, because even though we talk about returning citizens, I believe that there's a space for before I leave citizens.
Correct. And that's really, really great perspective, Kim. Here's why it really resonates with me. And so ultimately, through social entrepreneurship, I've been able to elevate myself to a disruptor by introducing that new business model, which has led to an opportunity to form untraditional business arrangements, which has led to establishing a fiduciary through relationships and garnering trust.
Yes.
So what does all that mean? That means taking your destiny in your own hands, right? And you take me back to my last prison experience where I was serving the 5 years. And I read Carter G. Woodson's book, Miseducation of the Negro, right? For the second time. I read it in juvenile hall when I was about 15.
Yeah.
Now I'm reading it when I'm about 39, right? And so one of the things that Carter G. Woodson points out, who was subsequently also the father of Black History Month, what he points out in that work is that people of color, that Black people, even though there's systemic racism, right? What Black people do in terms of assimilation into white culture is leave our communities. So thereby taking with them their relationships, their ingenuity, creativity, their wealth, everything that would build a community up. So thereby adding double blight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To the community.
Yes. Yes.
And so, and in all my yearnings for upward social mobility and inclusion, I can't say that I wasn't on that path.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what Nipsey was so powerful was his message of ownership.
Yeah.
And so what that allows one to do is to be successful by your own merit. And so for me, I've been able to expand on that concept of ownership, breaking it down into two types of philosophies, right? And so a sociological perspective and an economical perspective of ownership. And so for me, ownership is about being resilient, doing what you say you're going to do, right? Showing up and having a big heart.
Yeah.
From an economical perspective, ownership is about creating a plan that elevates the status of the people around you while solving for purpose and profitability. And so one of the vehicles that allows us to do that is social entrepreneurship, where you're looking at the pain points of a prospective client, customer, or community and delivering a package to solve for that, right? And so not just, so what I'm saying is you have a community that has a residential environment that has a vacant building right here, right?
Right.
And so, you know, as a business professional, you come in and say, I'm gonna put a discount store. But that's not what this community needs.
That's
right?
That's right.
You go and you talk with that community, you see what best suits that community, because that's going to springboard you from that concentric zone, right? And so that's the vehicle that social entrepreneurship allows for. And so that's my message.
Yeah.
And so when we have young people, right, as I was a young person who was, you know, had no ownership, had a narrative created for them, had no inclusion, no access, in an unbanked community, violence, systemic racism, all the things that perceived incivility theory stands for, dilapidated buildings, broken people, broken systems, violence, police, militarization of the community, right? You have all those things. And like you said earlier, you start to believe that it's all you can become.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Absolutely.
And so through that business model, I was able to design what I wish I had. Never go in, never go back, and help employers change the way they recruit.
Absolutely.
Right? And so in terms of never go in, I've been able to create a partnership with Kansas City Public Schools where we're delivering an after-school program to create barriers to the criminal justice system for our young people. But within that, we're partnering with Startland KC, and we're going to be able to create nonprofits with these students and get them to funding decisions with funding entities that has funded Swag Inc. Right. And so that's the ownership model where you can take what you're passionate about and look at a social inequity in your community and develop a business while in high school and solve for that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's great. Now, this is where I'll give you some pushback. I am not a proponent for grants. I'm not a proponent for grants for one reason.
You're not giving me pushback. I'll lie. You talking my language.
Entrepreneurship is two things.
Yes, ma'am.
It is to generate revenue and create jobs. And I think that we do need to teach our children how to be entrepreneurs and not business owners. We have a lot of business owners out here. And when I say business owner, you're not really generating revenue, and your family, your kids, everybody has to work in this business, but and it's sustaining your family.
Correct.
But it is not building around the community. You're
Correct.
in the community, but you're not building up the community.
Correct.
And so teaching real entrepreneurship is very, very important to me. And what I do like about your model, and even getting people to understand, nonprofits, and I work in a nonprofit, we know that, but I'm a for-profit person too.
Right.
On my for-profit. But in a nonprofit world, it is to create those areas in which there's gaps, to keep building up those areas that are falling down. But everybody shouldn't have a non-for-profit.
Right.
When you start a business, I'm going to start and I'm going to just throw a business out here. Please, nobody take offense. This is not about any one person. I'm just throwing this out here. T-shirts, for example, because there's tons of T-shirt companies out here. Or I can do the 360, Image 360. I get beat up all the time because I didn't choose somebody that knows me that has the Image 360. But behind that, I'm going to start a nonprofit to do this.
Correct.
And the idea is nonprofits get grants, and I'm going to be able to use this to sustain me, and I'll have this business over here, and it just... Unfortunately,
it doesn't work like
that. It doesn't work like that. But what I do love is the fact that we are reaching out to our kids, and we are starting in the high schools, and we are showing them that there is hope. So in the neighborhood where I live, when I leave to go to work, sometimes I get depressed.
Right.
Because I see our kids and I grew
the challenges,
up,
right?
Well, I grew up, the crazy thing is I grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods. I grew up where the streets were clean and the trash was picked up and the yards were manicured and there was no blight and there was walking distance to malls and strips and things like that. But I look at these kids standing on bus stops in the morning and they're standing next to trash that's been there for 6-7 months. Nobody's picked up. Old tires and mattresses and probably hypodermic needles and just everything. And then you see any and everybody walking up and down the street, which is, please don't get it wrong. Homelessness is another area that I think we need to address, mental health and homelessness.
Absolutely.
But when we start thinking about the hopelessness that these kids start with, and these are elementary kids.
Correct.
And they go through a system and they live in a community where we are not perpetuating success, but we're perpetuating the failures, and we are emphasizing the failures instead of emphasizing the successes of Black people. I always use Black Wall Street.
Right, I get it.
So happy that I took the time to go to Oklahoma and study and figure out what happened. And it was like a light bulb came on. It was like, okay, these were first generation free slaves that came with nothing, got re-enslaved by the Creek Indians, and figured out a way with nothing to build a community and build one of the wealthiest communities in America in their time.
Right.
And we tend to have this mindset that it was only Black dollars that built that. We didn't have any dollars.
Right.
So we had to sell. They were coming across the railroad tracks to buy our merchant. We were the seamstress, and we were the blacksmith, and we were the construction workers, and we were the workers, and we were getting money from them.
Correct.
Now we go in the door, and instead of being entrepreneurs and merchants, we're not at the table because they have figured out a way to say, we'll give them a few crumbs. And that's where I go back to grants. We'll give you a few crumbs to keep you, to make us feel good and to keep you employed.
Right.
But we're not going to do any impact.
Right.
So how do we become impactful? I think there's a different ingredients and mixture that we need to pull together in order for us to make a decision on how we become impactful.
Right.
Instead of sitting at so many different tables of people who don't understand, because you cannot understand this
Right.
unless you're in it.
Correct.
And I even tell this story that we can't address white privilege until we address black privilege.
Right.
And you said it yourself. Carter G. Woodson said it. We take our culture, our race, our funds, our finances. We take everything out of our community and give nothing back.
Correct.
And then we complain about the systemic racism.
Right.
Trust me, I know. I went to Ruskin High School when it was all white. I lived in Lee Summit. I lived in Overland Park. And I even have an understanding that there's an urban core and there's Midtown.
Right.
And Midtown is on the west side, urban core is on the east side.
Correct.
So we have a lot of work to do. And
Right.
I just want to, I know we're going to be running out of time. We talked about a few things. I definitely want to continue this. I think I might want to do a series on this.
Okay.
Because this is really important information. I do want to say the most important thing that we want to talk about is voting.
Correct. Correct.
We're not going to change the prison systems and the returning citizens and the completeness of citizenship for those returning without good politics. So we got to get to the polls. Please look into that camera and tell Kansas City everything you want them to know that's coming up, what you need,
Okay.
what we can do to be assistance, and where we can find you.
Absolutely. If I can I speak to the grant question or the grant? Do we have enough time for that? Just real quick.
Yeah, we can do that.
Can I wrap that up? Because that's really, really important.
Okay.
And so, as I said earlier, Kim, it's all about ownership.
Yeah.
And one thing that grants put you in a disadvantage to do is to be nimble, to be agile, and to have control of your destiny.
Ooh-wee.
Right. And it's not a sustainable business model. Right. Because you're the time that it takes you to fill the grant, maybe you get it, maybe you won't. And so for me, I had the opportunity, fortunate, to go from someone who could never get a job to being in the human resource space, also working at the Full Employment Council as a career development executive and obtaining a master's degree in human resource management while building out Swag Inc.
Yeah.
And so it helped me do something unique in the nonprofit space, and that's create a revenue generating model. And we look to leverage our 501c3 tax exempt status.
Okay.
And so we get compensated per connection of our clients. We have two pathways, upskilling and a direct retention support. So if we're doing something in the construction craftsman trades with our partners like J Dunn Construction, we receive 10% of the annual on day one.
Yeah.
If we're doing direct retention support for our partners at Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Kansas City, then we're compensated over 6 months, $3,250, right?
Yeah.
So the more that we can expound that, then the more that we can grow without relying on granting.
Yeah.
And then there's evolved trust-based foundations, right, who would take away those barriers that traditional foundations employ on startup nonprofits and also leaders of color. And so there's those opportunities within the social entrepreneurship space. And so those are the things that we'll be able to facilitate to our young peoples, those acumens, ideas, and relationships kind of thing.
Hey, we might have to talk after this. Help me out. I like that. So real quickly, we gotta wrap this up. I hate to do that, but please tell us where we can find you.
Absolutely.
And what we can do for you.
So Swag Inc., we're located inside the Equal Minded Cafe and Event Center, 4327 Truce Avenue, Kansas City, Missouri, 64109. We have a support group there every Sunday from 10 a.m. to 11 for families impacted by mass incarceration. Also, if you're interested in supporting Swag, we're always looking for new employers to connect with. Also, we're looking for volunteers and sharing the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion for returning citizens. And so for Swag Inc., diversity, equity, inclusion Diversity is developing relationship with employers that allow our clients to transition back as stakeholders. The equity refers to creating market value assets that allow our clients to be portable amongst different industries. And the inclusion is promoting that ownership for people impacted by mass incarceration and elevating the status of people in positions of power to do something about it. And lastly, we're always accepting donations. If you wanted to support us monetarily, we really appreciate that. It goes into our HOPES program, Healing, Ownership, Planning, Employment, Sustainability.
All right, then. So that wraps up another episode of Speak Up. You know, I can't say enough about Televida and all the work and the opportunity that they give me every week to bring to you good content. Know this, the rate of recidivism in the U.S. is, look it up. Let me just say that, look it up. You would be shocked. And I think it's really important that we understand how important it is for us to get out and vote. Vote, vote, vote. If you are registered, and I hope that you are, on Tuesday, and I believe it's November the 8th this year, I need you to be at the polls, putting in your vote, casting your vote. I don't care who you vote for, but vote for someone and know your candidate. Again, I want to thank Televida. I'll see you next week. Have a great week. Be a blessing to someone. No, better yet, be a blessing to everyone. Smile today. Thanks.